On November 4, 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking over 60 Americans hostage. This action was a way for student revolutionaries to declare a separation of Iran's past, as well as an end of American interference in their country. Another cause that prompted this was President Jimmy Carter allowing the Shah to come into the United States for cancer treatment. The Shah was an Iranian pro-Western autocrat who was expelled from Iran. The action of taking hostages was also a way to raise the profile of the revolution's leader, anti-American cleric Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Especially because the Shah was a brutal dictator who had little respect for human rights. The hostages were set free on January 21, 1981, 444 days after the crisis began. The liberation of the hostages occurred just hours after Ronald Reagan's inaugural address, and many people believe the crisis cost Jimmy Carter a second term. The source of tension between Iran and the United States originated over an oil conflict. Much of the petroleum in Iran was divided up between Britain and the United States, which was a very profitable system for both countries. However, in 1951, Iran elected a new prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. The new prime minister planned to nationalize the country's lucrative oil business. In response to this, the CIA and British intelligence service devised a plan in order to overthrow Mossadegh and replace him with a leader that was more receptive to Western countries. The plan was known as Operation TP Ajax. Mossadegh was disposed of, and a new government was put into place in August of 1953. The new leader, chosen by the United States and Britain, was a member of Iran's royal family. His name was Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, often referred to as just the Shah. The Shah's government was anti-communist, pro-Western, and secular. Under its new government, Iran gave 80% of its oil to the United States and Great Britain in exchange for millions of dollars in financial aid. The plan was very successful in the eyes of the CIA, and it served as a model for other covert operations during the Cold War, such as government takeover in Guatemala and failed intervention in Cuba. However, many Iranians were infuriated by the actions of the United States. In fact, he had his own secret police organization, known as the Savak, who tortured and murdered thousands of people. On top of this, the Iranian government spent billions of dollars on American-made weapons, while the economy in Iran suffered. Many of the Iranians who were furious with the Shah and the United States turned to Khomeini for protest. Khomeini, who was a radical cleric, hoped to create greater autonomy for the Iranian government. With the help of Khomeini, in July of 1979, the revolutionaries forced the Shah to discard his government and flee to Egypt. Khomeini himself filled in and installed a militant government. The United States was fearful of creating hostilities in the Middle East, so they did not defend Iran from this new government. President Carter was reluctant to help the Shah due to the Shah's terrible records with the people. However, he did allow the Shah to enter the United States in October of 1979 for treatment of an advanced malignant lymphoma. It was considered a humanitarian move rather than a political one by Carter, yet Iranians were furious about the situation. On November 4th, just after the Shah received treatment, a group of Khomeini supporters smashed the gates and scaled the walls at the American embassy in Tehran. The Iranians seized 66 hostages, mostly diplomats and embassy employees. After a short period of time, 13 of the hostages were released because they were not citizens of the United States. Soon after, a 14th hostage was released due to health complications, but by the summer of 1980, 52 hostages still remained captive. Diplomatic and economic sanctions didn't slow down Khomeini's anti-American efforts. Although the hostages were never injured, they were subjected to harsh treatment, as they were paraded through the streets blindfolded. They weren't allowed to speak or read, they rarely changed clothes, and they never knew their fate. President Carter, who was frustrated with the slow progress, focused all his efforts in office to resolve the conflict. Carter devised a risky military operation. The plan involved sending an elite rescue team into the embassy and trying to save the hostages. However, problems were encountered. The day of the attempt, a huge sandstorm caused 2 helicopters to malfunction, and one veered off course into a large transport plane. In the end, 8 American servicemen were killed in what was known as Operation Eagle Claw, and it was aborted shortly after the accident. Constant media coverage of the crisis caused a demoralizing backdrop for the election of 1980. Carter's failure to solve the crisis made him appear as weak, plus his constant obsession and focus on the situation made him neglect his campaign. The opposing Republican candidate, Ronald Reagan, took advantage of Carter's mistakes. Reagan won by a landslide and was inaugurated on January 21, 1981. Just after Reagan's inauguration, the hostages were released after 444 days. However, some politicians speculate that Reagan negotiated with the Iranians to hold the hostages until after the election. After the release of the hostages, the rumors surrounding Reagan developed into a popular conspiracy theory. The theory revolved around the idea that Reagan made a deal with Iran to hold the hostages until after the election, in order to hurt Carter's campaign and win the election. The theory became very relevant during the Iran-Contra affair, which was when Reagan's administration supplied weapons to Iran in order to secure the release of the hostages. The armaments given to Iran included 808 American-made TOW anti-tank missiles. This action was not approved by Congress, and it became a large issue due to the fact that Iran was still an enemy of the United States. The Iran-Contra affair occurred in 1985, yet was not known publicly until 1986, when Congress blamed the president for supplying Iran with weapons. The hostages met with Carter after their release, yet the group was split on their opinion of Carter. Some felt that he left them unprotected, while others felt that it was not his fault. Even today, the hostage crisis affects the political, diplomatic, and economic relations between Iran and the United States.